Hello, hello, and welcome to Third Shot Rants with Howard and Gina. I'm Gina. Hi, Howard.
Hi, Gina.
And we're two pickleball friends living in Chicago.
Gina, what are we doing this episode?
Howard, today we're talking about DUPR. What is a DUPR? DUPR stands for Dynamic Universal Pickleball Rating. It's a numbered scale that's designed to correspond with your level of play. There's a rating and reliability component to the score. The scale goes from 2.0 to 8.0, with professionals landing over 6.0. So there's an algorithm at work determining your skill level with every match result that's submitted. And the median DUPR in the U.S. is 3.5.
Yeah, and as you said, so there's a rating component and there's a reliability index component, and both are part of your DUPR profile. The rating is fairly intuitive. It's the numbers that everyone's familiar with, the 3.5, 4.0, 4.5, and that's based on how well you do in these DUPR recorded matches. So you and a partner play a match against other people, and you've agreed either between yourselves or you're part of a session at a club or in a tournament where the scores get reported to DUPR and are entered into their algorithm and get calculated and update your DUPR rating over time. So that's your rating. And then there's a reliability index component as well, right?
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the reliability index. How can we tell if this DUPR looks accurate or seems accurate?
Yeah, the rating, the index goes from 0 to 100, and it's really based on how many matches you've played, how recently you've played, and I think there's no hard rule, but I think people tend to think if you have a reliability index that's 60, 70, 80% or more, that's pretty accurate. If it's well below that, then it probably doesn't mean much at all, because we all know you can play one match and anything can happen in that one match. You could have a really great match, you could have a bad match. That's not really going to reliably establish your rating just based on that one match or two matches.
That makes sense. So we're not going to weigh too heavily when we only have like a small amount of data about a person.
Yeah, and one thing I've heard the DUPR folks talk about is they would really like for people to focus, maybe not quite as much, but a lot on the reliability index as well as the rating. I think people are used to hearing about ratings. So when you and I talk with other people about DUPR, everyone's maybe a little bit obsessed about their ratings. Am I 3.5? Am I 4.0? And so on. And that obviously is very important because that's a measure of how well you're playing in these DUPR recorded matches. But you have to recognize that there's a reliability index as well. And if you don't have a reliable DUPR, then it's not reliable. It probably doesn't mean very much. And I've heard the DUPR folks talk about how they wish clubs would use not just the rating to do DUPR rated sessions, but maybe have a threshold for having a reliable DUPR on top of that. So a 4.0 session is not just people who hold a 4.0 DUPR, but it's maybe people who hold a 4.0 DUPR that have also a reliability index of, you can make it up, maybe it's 60% or 80%, whatever you choose.
That makes sense, right? Because there might be like a small subset of people who maybe reach the number that they're looking for, that's their goal, and then they stop playing those types of matches, and like it's like, okay, it's set. I'm all done. I'm at that number that I wanted.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's I think definitely that going on, but there's also just people who maybe haven't played in a while and their rating is not going to reflect their current level of play, or they just had one great game or one off game, and their DUPR is not going to reflect who they really are. So I think for the most part, when there are discrepancies between someone's DUPR rating and how well they really play, it's often when they have a very unreliable DUPR. And if you're able to impose a reliability threshold as well as a DUPR rating threshold to gate your sessions as a club or maybe as a tournament, then that would certainly make things more consistent across the group.
That makes sense. And so for a DUPR to work as intended, we need the rating and we need the reliability. Seems accurate.
I think so, yeah. But I think from the club's perspective, it can be challenging because a lot of people don't have DUPRs, just any DUPR to start with. And many people who do have DUPRs have ones that are kind of stale, possibly because they're trying to game the system, but also possibly because they're not playing DUPR matches that much. And that's kind of fine. But then it means you can't put too much weight on their DUPR rating.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, yeah, we might be in a position where I'm like, you know what, I'm just doing some open plays, just doing some rec play with my buddies, and yeah, the DUPR can get super stale over half a year or something like that.
Yeah. Gina, how do you get a DUPR? How do you play DUPR matches?
Good question. So if you go on DUPR's website, you can actually find a coach in your area that could assess you. I found that to be interesting because before I thought the only way to do that was to get a DUPR is to play in some sanctioned tournaments or leagues. But yeah, you can get assessed through a DUPR coach. There are tournaments and leagues. What people don't usually know is that you can get your group together and do your own organized games and input them into DUPR if everyone agrees.
Yeah.
So that's pretty neat. Just that it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. As we know, like tournaments and leagues, they all kind of add up. Right now, local Chicago clubs have formed these MLP-style teams to compete every other weekend against other clubs in the area. These matches are all recorded in DUPR. And then the clubs in the area also have, like on their schedule, some DUPR recorded events. So SPF has a Chicago Slice DUPR event on the second Tuesday of the month. Piccadilly just added a DUPR ladder on Sundays for players in the 3.5 to 4.25 range. And then Pickleball Clubhouse has a DUPR ladder on Friday nights. And we have to mention our friend David Tran, who started running some free DUPR ladders outside during the summer. He did this out of the kindness of his heart. He did it for the community. People really took to it. They really enjoyed this experience of getting those DUPR matches in. So thanks to David for always giving back to the pickleball community.
So, Gina, is he a friend of the pod?
I would consider David Tran a friend of the pod.
Okay, well, we'll call him a friend of the pod. Maybe we'll get T-shirts made up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also want to say thanks to David as well, because in thinking about this episode and preparing for it, he also sent me a lot of useful podcasts and links talking about DUPR, because I think he kind of thinks about that a lot. So that was super useful to me or to us.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Gene, as you said, people can set up their own DUPR matches. So they don't have to be part of a club session or part of a tournament. They can just agree with their friends that they're going to play a match and report all their scores to DUPR and validate those scores. I will say that there are levels of weights that DUPR assigns to scores from different sources. So if you just go and play your own private games, you can do that, and you can report those, and they will be counted in your DUPR rating, but they will get a lower weight than the games that a club reports, and I think tournaments are yet higher weight on top of club open play sessions or league sessions, and that's from DUPR's perspective to kind of, probably protect the integrity of the scores so that people aren't doing too much to try to game scores. So if it's a tournament, that they view that as really pretty reputable, that there's a tournament director who presumably they have some knowledge of, who's running that tournament. If it's a club, it's a real club and they're running a session. But they also let just 4 people, if they want to play for a DUPR match, they can do that, and that will get reported, and it's part of your score, but it's going to get a somewhat lower weight.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so I like the fact that there's an option that is not doing something that costs like an arm and a leg, and is a little
Yeah.
bit more casual, but it's interesting that the algorithm's going to take that into consideration and weight that score appropriately.
Yeah. The other interesting thing that you and I have talked a little bit about as we've looked into this is you can for non-rated players, so for people who don't have a DUPR at all, can play a game, and that can get entered, and after that game, each of those 4 players will get a rating, and that's because DUPR assumes that everyone going in is at about a 3-5 level. And you can kind of question that assumption, I think. Maybe you should. But that's what the system will do. So you can have 2 people play 2 other people. The people who win will have the DUPRs go up a little bit above 3-5, so they might end up at 3-6 or 3-7. The people who lose that match might go down to 3-4 or 3-3. And it'll be a super low reliability DUPR, but they will have DUPR ratings that come out of a match between 4 people who came in with no DUPR rating at all. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Because, yeah, like you said, the 3.5, that skews pretty high if that's the median DUPR already in pickleball. So just assuming that people are completely average at that sport the first time they're playing a match, yeah, that seems extreme. So I guess the idea is that we might get this score. It might be skewed a little bit high, but that over time the system would kind of work it out, right?
Yeah. I think the idea for why DUPR would, so it can obviously be unreliable because you have no idea what the actual level is of those 4 players who are playing each other. So when those 2 teams play in that match, one team is going to necessarily win that match, and they're going to end up with a DUPR that's like 3-6 or 3-7. The people who chose to play that match, they could in fact be 2-5 level players. They could be 4-5 level players, right? Anything is possible. We don't really know anything about those players other than that they played this one match, and there's going to be a winner, and they're going to end up with a DUPR that's 3-6 or 3-7-ish. But it may have very little bearing with what their true level is. I think the reason DUPR does this is it's kind of nice to let people get a number right away after they've played a match. I think they figure, well, those people will then play other matches, including matches against people who do have existing DUPR ratings, and that'll all get sort of worked out after they play a few more games.
So you're saying we got to get them hooked on DUPR by giving them a DUPR immediately, even though we really have no idea. I get it. It does make sense. It does. I get it. But why not defer to like 2.0 and just go from there?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense either, because then you're really kind of digging yourself out of a hole.
So Gina, as you know, I spend way too much time looking at TikTok, right? That's probably that's my biggest problem.
It's what I like most about you.
And this TikTok came across my radar, where there's an example of a woman who entered a 2-5 tournament. So this is a tournament that was an official tournament. It was at the 2-5 to 3-0 level. She entered the tournament. She didn't have a DUPR rating going in, and virtually none of the other players in this 2-5 tournament had a DUPR rating going in. She goes and she plays, and lo and behold, at the end of this tournament, which she did great in, she won all her matches, she ends up with a 4-2 DUPR after playing a 2-5 tournament.
Wow. Yeah, you got to be like the talk of the town after that.
Yeah. And it's because of this effect of DUPR starting everyone at 3-5. So, she wins her first match and her DUPR goes up a bit. I think she smokes the next team, maybe pickles them in the next match after that. And because that team had won their prior match, they were assumed to be maybe like 3-6 or 3-7. And that going into that second match, she pickles a 3-6 team, and someone who can pickle a 3-6 team is probably like a 4-0-ish player, right? So that's what the algorithm does, because it's assuming that everyone's at 3-5 going in.
Yeah, that one's super interesting. To go to a 2.5 tournament, come out of 4.2. Who knows how long it takes to really kind of get an accurate number there. Like if there's a certain number of matches and I guess it's just like a variety of matches, like of different leveled people who have DUPRs.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. That's if she, the danger is, hopefully she understands she entered the 2.5 tournament, and that probably is roughly where she is at. Maybe she's at 3.0, maybe she's at 3.2 or something. But she chose to enter the 2.5 tournament. The danger would be if she thinks, oh, I've got this 4.2 rating, like that's a DUPR rating that I got. It's all very official. I can look at my profile and I see myself with a nice shiny 4.2 rating. I'll go play in a 4.0 tournament next.
Whew.
Right? And
yeah.
Probably she would get smoked in that.
Yeah, the algo will get the data that it wants.
Yeah. But I think that does happen. So she then went out and played other DUPR matches. Maybe she's savvy enough to not go into a 4.0 tournament, but she goes and plays 3.0 people or 3.5 people, then I think it will sort itself out. Mm-hmm. But one of the reasons I bring up this example is, I think the algorithm and DUPR works pretty well when people are playing matches across a broad spectrum of opponents and maybe with different partners. But when you don't do that, when you're in this tiny little isolated bubble, you can end up with ratings that are really out of whack. Right? And we'll get a little more into that later on.
We have got to give the algorithm a variety of matches, of partners, tournaments, all that good stuff. So partners too, right? Because one of the other challenges I think DUPR has is most of the DUPRs that people care about are their doubles DUPRs. You can have a singles DUPR as well, but when you're trying to figure out what the DUPR is for a doubles team, DUPR doesn't see how well each person in that team played in the match. All it knows is there's a team, and frankly, I think if two people only ever play together, their DUPRs, I believe, would end up exactly the same over time, because the algorithm doesn't have any other information to distinguish between those two players. Yeah, we saw some good examples of that too, of the algorithm trying to figure out like who this new person is based on a new partnership, or it's looking at two different sets of data, two different sets of reliability, and it's doing the best that it can with the score that gets input to decide, oh, okay, this person must be this rating because of how the outcome of that match was. Howard, what is your singles DUPR, would you say? Because you smoke me on the regular.
I don't have a DUPR. We did talk about how when we actually played singles way back when, I think I did actually smoke you.
Yes, multiple times.
But I think now you would probably smoke me.
I don't know.
But I think that'll be maybe we'll roll that into our bar game challenge, perhaps.
Oh gosh, yeah. Let's get one game of singles in before the end of this year.
But I think that so singles you actually could. So one of the challenges is if you're trying to figure out who is better at pickleball, if you're talking about doubles, then you've got to account for who that person is playing with and how well they play with that person. And that's more challenging to figure out. If we were just trying to figure out who was better at singles, we could go play singles a lot of time. We could go play singles, 7 times or 15 times, and you'd figure it out. It's not impossible, but it's harder when DUPR is trying to deal with doubles ratings, and you've got to deal with how much is this person contributing versus what their partner is. And DUPR doesn't have visibility into how that match is actually being played. It just knows the score, and that score is coming from the contribution of both people on the team, and it doesn't have any way to disentangle that. I think that's one of the big challenges.
DUPR is doing the best that they can. I guess we are too, right, as people?
Are they doing the best they can?
I don't know.
All right, we're gonna get into that.
So this year, the algorithm changed for DUPR, and that was kind of big news.
Yeah, I think super controversial. So at least to some people. So in July of 2025, they moved to a new algorithm. The old algorithm that used to exist prior to July, basically, if you won a match, your DUPR would go up. If you lost a match, your DUPR would go down. And it didn't matter whether you were favored to win that match or not, right? So you could use an example of if a 4-0 team played a 5-0 team, and let's say that 4-0 team's expected to lose very, very heavily to that 5-0 team. But if that 4-0 team only lost 11-9 to the 5-0 team, that 4-0 team's DUPR would still go down, even though it had outperformed what its rating was going in. And that 5-0 team, even though they just barely squeaked by a 4-0 team that they should handily beat, that 5-0 team's DUPR would go up. Probably just a little bit in both those cases, because neither, the 5-0 team underperformed and the 4-0 team overperformed. So neither's moving a ton because of that match result. But that 4-0 team's not getting any credit for really what should be viewed as above expectations performance. And that's the system that used to exist prior to July of 2025 this year. And what they changed was instead they formed expectations of what the result of the match should be based on the levels of the teams going in, right? So if let's not make it a 4-0 and a 5-0 team, because that's a big gap. But let's say you have a 4-0 team playing a 4-5 team. That's still a pretty big gap. And what DUPR has come out and said is that at least at one point, the expectation for that match is the 4-5 team should win by something like 11 to 5.5 points. That's kind of the average result from a 4-5 team playing a 4-0 team. If the 4-5 team beats the 4-0 team by a greater margin than expected, so if they win 11-5, if they win 11-3, 11-1, if they pickle them, then that 4-5 team has done better than the algorithm expected them to do going into that match. And the 4-5 team's DUPR will go up after that match. If, on the other hand, that 4-5 team didn't do as well as expected, certainly if they lose, that 4-5 team's DUPR is going down. That makes complete intuitive sense to everyone, I think. But if that 4-5 team only wins by 11-7, 11-8, 11-9, then in the eyes of the algorithm, they have underperformed, and their DUPR will go down even though they won the match. So they won the match. It could be the finals match of a tournament that they won, but their DUPR would still go down because they underperformed.
So in that scenario,
what do you think of that?
Yeah, that seems really valid. I mean, this is how sports betting goes, right? Is you've got a spread to take into consideration, especially when there's mixed match teams. And so for that, in that scenario that you mentioned, to have that 4-5 team maybe just scrape by the 4-0 team, yeah, we're getting new information. They're probably not 4-5, or maybe that 4-0 team isn't a 4-0. They're both going to kind of squeak a little bit in both directions there. Like the 4-0 team, maybe they're 4.2, maybe they're 4.15, something. But yeah, the algorithm's getting more data, and it's getting more accurate based on that. And so a win is not just a win, but it's who did you win against, and that should matter. So I like that change. And two, like, it also, I think that it should prevent people from sandbagging in tournaments. And so sandbagging is when you're playing maybe a level down, like, because you want to get a medal or something. There's nothing wrong with that. Sorry. But like you're 4-0 playing in a 3-5 tournament. you shouldn't really be rewarded that you beat people that you're better than at pickleball, right? And so I think that, if you sign up for that tournament now and you accidentally lose a match, like, you're going to pay for it with your DUPR. So it's a risky choice to sandbag now. So it's not just going to be all wins. Means DUPR goes up. It's going to really kind of pick apart what level you're playing at right now.
Yeah, and you're gonna pay for it even if you win all your matches, but you don't win them by quite as much as you should win them. You're gonna pay for it then as well.
If anything, the pressure might be on a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah. And I think I've seen complaints online. I've heard one or two people in person express this to me, that they feel it's not fair if they've won a match for their DUPR to go down. But I think, as you said, it really matters who you're playing against. So if you're playing an even match, if you're playing a match where your rating going in is about the same as the other teams, then if you win, that's a solid result, and your DUPR should go up, and it will. But if you're playing a team that's quite a bit lower than you, and you barely squeak by, then that's not a great result for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the scoreline matters, and the differential is important. So we can't just look at we're already looking at such like little amounts of data, right? Like, it's not measuring any skill or anything like that. But all we can really go off of is the score and the win or loss, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, in my day job, I'm sort of a data type person, and there's information in that score. So if you just barely squeak by 11-9 in a game that you were heavily favored to win, that's information that should be accounted for, and you shouldn't get credit for just squeaking by. I mean, it's great you won and you got your gold medal that you can enjoy, but you didn't. You underperformed in that match, and your DUPR should get penalized for it, I think.
Mm-hmm. So Howard, in about a week, I'm signed up for a 4.5 tournament with a.
That's exciting, Gina.
We were deciding between 4.0 and 4.5. We're both ranked about 4.3, 4.4, and we decided to go up because I don't feel like we have much to lose. There are a lot of 4.4s in the 4.0 bracket, so we were going to definitely get good competition, but it's also just an opportunity for us to kind of test our skills and just kind of see what happens. Have some fun with it and get some good matches in.
Yeah, I think even if you face people that are considerably higher, the new algorithm also does protect you a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to, if you end up facing a bunch of teams that are toward the high end of the 4.5 to close to 5.0 range, then your DUPRs won't go down unless you underperform your expectations, and you'll be expected to lose those matches, and if you don't lose by more than you expected to do, then your DUPRs will actually go up. So that's pretty good as well.
Yeah, so I like that it kind of just felt like a safer opportunity to take this risk, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I shouldn't go home with a destroyed DUPR, but I can get some really good matches, and I'm hoping for some success, whatever that looks like on match day.
Gina, do we think DUPRs are accurate?
I think yes, right? If you have a reliable score, those usually do seem to be quite accurate. I don't know the one that's, a half a point even off, like that I could think of any person that I know.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think for the most part of the people I know or that we know, DUPRs seem about right. We'll get into some possible issues in a little bit, but as you say, there aren't people who are way out of whack. So I don't generally, I see almost no one whose DUPR feels like it's even 0.4, 0.5 off of where they seem like they're at.
So Howard, is there a little bit of a rant in there? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, okay, Gina, this is where I'm going to get canceled, or maybe we're going to get canceled. I do feel like people maybe will complain about their DUPRs generally they complain about it being lower than it should be, right? That's the complaint. But for the most part, I think they're about right. I don't see people who are way off. I mean, I maybe see people who are 0.1 off or 0.2 off perhaps from what they should be, but that's within the range. And go if you want a rating and you care about your rating being accurate and reliable, go and play some more DUPR matches. And you can look at those matches and you can see the ratings of the people you're playing against. And if you're at 3.5 and you really think you should be 3.8 or 4.0, then you should be able to prove that in DUPR matches. And the algorithm will update. And if you're at 3.5 and you think you're 4.0, you should be winning matches against 3.5s and 3.7s and 3.8s. Go out and play those matches, and your DUPR will go up, and it will reflect the results of those matches. That's what the algorithm's there for.
Ouch, Howard. No, I'm kidding. I think that sounds reasonable. I think it's hard for people too, because we think we're really putting in the work. My drops are dropping, or this shot's looking really good. And DUPR doesn't get to see any of that. It's really just seeing, can you perform on game day? We might be feeling anxious. We might be feeling a certain kind of way. And it's really hard to settle ourselves into those big tournaments and things that we've been really looking forward to. And yeah, DUPR can't evaluate our skills outside of wins and losses. So we have to just kind of accept that that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, or don't have a DUPR rating, or don't care about your DUPR rating.
Yeah.
I don't have one. I don't feel a huge need to get one. Maybe it would matter if a lot of the sessions at clubs became DUPR gated.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I don't really care, and I sort of, I can find people who make sense to play with, and that's, you can do all of that without having a DUPR rating. But if you do care and you feel you're underrated, go and play some more matches. And if you are severely underrated, it should not be that hard for you to raise your rating by beating the people that are rated above you because you're underrated.
All right, you heard it here.
We'll call that a mini rant.
I think where people do get worried though is that when you're traveling, if I go see my parents in Tampa and I go to the club down there, I need to have a DUPR to get into an open play, because I can't just talk to the owner because I maybe know them and say, hey, let me in. Like I could around here, something like that. So yeah, it could be kind of restrictive and make us feel a little bit excluded if we're out of our normal pickleball universes.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I haven't done much traveling and kind of playing when I travel, so I hadn't really thought about that, and that's a totally fair perspective. What about DUPR Biomes, Gina? What are those? What do we think of those?
Howard, a DUPR biome, which maybe we should consider trademarking. This term is a situation where maybe a friend group is only playing with the exact same people, and all of those scores are getting recorded into DUPR. DUPR's not going to have enough information on any of the players in this group without having any sort of outside matches. And so these DUPR biomes are created, and what can happen is that we might be improving our games and DUPR can't actually see that, or improving ourselves and our skill levels, and DUPR's not able to accurately reflect that because we haven't gone and tested our skills against anyone outside of this group. So I just kind of found that whole concept pretty interesting, is that we really do have to feed it a variety of info to get an accurate and reliable DUPR.
Yeah, and I think that diversity of games against other people, that's what matters. Because like you say, you could have a friend group of 4 friends or 8 friends, and you're playing each other over and over again. And let's say you're entering all those matches into DUPR. DUPR will sort out the relative skill of the players in that group, but it has no idea whether. So let's say you're a really close group. Those are the only DUPR matches that you play. Well, you guys could be amazing. You could be drilling like crazy, hiring Gina as a coach, really working on your game, and you could improve dramatically. But Dupe has no idea, based on just the results that you report, whether that's the case or whether you guys are just playing exactly the same pickleball you've been playing for the last year or 2 years. And so if you do want to work on your DUPR, you probably have to play DUPR matches with a broader range of people.
Howard, tell us what happened in Hong Kong.
Yeah, so this was super interesting to me. There's this guy named John Q, K-E-W. We'll put a link in the show notes. He's a pretty prominent pickleball podcaster. He went to Hong Kong to cover a PPA tournament there. And the thing that was really interesting to me was he said he watched some of the amateur brackets in that tournament. And he was watching a 3-5 bracket. And he said these guys blew him away. It was a 3-5 bracket, and he thought all the players were a minimum of 4-5 plus. And this is just a regular amateur bracket like you have in these tournaments. And he asked some of the people he was with, like, are these guys sandbagging? Are these like 4-5s playing down at 3-5? And they said, no, like these people have, 3-7, 3-8 DUPRs, something like that. And the 3-5 bracket is a totally appropriate range for them. And it just seems like, I think this is a little bit a bigger example of the biome that you were talking about, Gina. This is a case where the players in Hong Kong, they don't play much with players outside of Hong Kong. And it's possible that the overall level of play is just significantly higher there. And if literally no one in Hong Kong played anyone outside of Hong Kong, then there's nothing that DUPR has to equilibrate the scores for the Hong Kong players with the players outside of Hong Kong. It's a big example of the friend group that we were talking about. Like, if it's completely closed, everyone in Hong Kong is just playing each other, the DUPR algorithm will sort out the level of play among the players in Hong Kong, but it has no way to figure out what that level is relative to, let's say, players in the US.
That is fascinating, Howard. To go to a tournament like that and see these quote unquote 3.5 players just kind of playing high level pickle is got to be really surprising. And yeah, it really kind of like pokes a hole in DUPR a little bit of that. Yeah, how do we make this more universal?
Yeah, I did a little asking around. So I have a really good friend who lived in Hong Kong for a long time. He just moved from Hong Kong, but he lived in Hong Kong. He's a serious tennis player. He's played a tiny bit of pickle in Hong Kong. And the one thing he said to me was, it's harder to get in casually in Hong Kong because you got to make a reservation somewhere. You have to pay to use a court. There really aren't free courts the way we have where we live, where you can just go down to the local park and often just join an open play and just play. And it's not like it's super expensive necessarily to rent a court in Hong Kong, but it's a much more conscious act to go do that than just show up with your kid or show up with a couple of your friends down at the local park in Chicago and start playing some games.
So there's like just enough of a barrier probably to keep away the brand new beginners, maybe who've never played any racket sport, because you know what, they haven't played one yet. Why start now when you got to go make a reservation somewhere? Yeah,
exactly. And this comes back to the things we talked about, both the biome issue of having a closed group and DUPR's approach of starting everyone off at 3-5. Mm-hmm. So DUPR's implicitly assuming that the average level of play in Hong Kong is about 3-5, same as it is in the US. Now, the average level, it could be higher, it could be lower. DUPR doesn't have any direct way of knowing that, but it just kind of assumes it's the same. And it could be true, it might not be true. And in this case, at least based on the account of this this one podcaster who's, he's like a pretty serious guy. He covers a lot of events and he does a lot of racket reviews and he's just kind of pretty knowledgeable. That doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah. Where do we go from here? What do you think?
Well, I think this kind of ties into our next and kind of final topic, Gina. Something for which possibly I'm also going to get canceled. But do we think men's and women's DUPRs are equivalent? By which I mean, for example, if you took the average 4.0 man, is he equivalent to an average 4.0 woman? If you had a team that was 4.0 men playing 4.0 women, are they about even or are they not?
I don't think they're exactly even. I think it might be about 0.2 off.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think that?
I think that that's a good question. I think that because I've thought about this a little bit, but I think that because men have more muscle mass than women, like we might be at the same skill level, but you're always like you're going to be able to hit the ball harder, and that plays into winning.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, I think the other thing you've mentioned to me, Gina, is you've had some women tell you they go and play in. Let's kind of define terms a little bit. So there are traditional gendered games where you have men playing men, so men's doubles, and women's doubles, and mixed doubles where it's a team of one man and one woman playing another man and another woman. But you've told me that you've had friends who've gone and played outside of those traditional gendered groups, and it might be one woman playing a group with three men, or two women playing against two men, and they've kind of had their DUPRs go down a little bit as a result in playing those kinds of groups. Mm-hmm. And I think that doesn't. I've had a couple of people tell me something similar too. And I think if men's DUPRs and women's DUPRs were exactly equivalent, that wouldn't happen, because if a 4.0 men's team played a 4.0 women's team, they should be about even.
Right. So we're lacking some universality of this between the genders.
And I think it comes back to the biome issue a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because it's possible the average level of men is a little. So DUPR assumes, again, everyone's starting at 3.5. The average level, if it was just men playing only men in their own biome and women playing only women in their own biome, it's like the Hong Kong example again. If you'd have two different systems, and there's no reason that a 3.5 in the men's group, if they only ever played other men, would line up with the 3.5 in the women's group. And I think, probably for some of the reasons you talk about, like muscle mass or height, mm-hmm. that might affect what the average level of the men who choose to play pickleball would be versus the women. There's no reason to think it's necessarily equivalent. Just based on looking at people's DUPRs and based on, the example of women going and playing in these non-traditional gender groups, that, just to put it kind of frankly, like, there might be a concern women shouldn't go and play in these non-traditional gender groups because their DUPRs might get trashed as a result of doing that. But that wouldn't happen if men's DUPRs were equivalent to women's DUPRs, because you could try to control for that. You could try to control for the fact that men tend on average to be stronger, and reflect that in their DUPRs. But the way DUPR works with these kind of separate biomes that can tend to arise, it's not really going to deal with that.
This is super true, Howard. I do think you're skating on some thin ice here, but I mean, I agreed.
Yeah, I mean-
I agreed, right? Like, I do think that there is it needs to skew to be truly universal. But these are the tough topics that Third Shot Rants is all about.
Right. I mean, just to be clear, that there are countless women who are better than men, better than me. You're in doubles. You're probably better than me, right? I'm very comfortable saying that, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about whether DUPR ratings are equivalent between the two groups. So if you take a 5-0 woman, she's unquestionably going to be better than a 4-0 man. Like that. I think that's pretty easy. The kind of adjustments we're talking about might be, like you said, maybe it's like 0.2, 0.25, something like that. So it's not a question of whether men are necessarily better than women, but just whether these DUPR ratings, because they arise in these somewhat separate biomes. So it's not with men and women. It's not fully separate the way countries might almost be fully separate, because there are these not just mixed doubles games, but there are these non-traditional gender games. But it's not where most of the games are. So I don't think DUPR does a great job of controlling for that. And I'm gonna probably get myself in more trouble, but I'm gonna say that I'm gonna make that a rant as well. That I think DUPR could do more to try to adjust for these differences, right? Because they've got a massive amount of data on these games. So they have said that there's something like 20% of the matches in their system come from these non-traditional gender grouping. So matches that are not men's doubles, women's doubles, or strict mixed doubles. So matches where it might be two men playing two women. They could go and investigate whether men's and women's DUPRs are equivalent. So just to give you an example, you could look up, they've got all this data. You could look up every match in which there's a 4-0 men's team that's played a 4-0 women's team. And if men's DUPRs and women's DUPRs were equivalent, they can look at all these matches, and those matches should come out roughly 50-50 if their DUPRs going in were accurate. And who knows, maybe we're wrong. Maybe that really is the case. Maybe they do play about even in those matches. I think we suspect they don't. And they can look at that. They can see, well, how often and what's the score differential does the 4-0 man's team beat the 4-0 women's team? And they could try to make adjustments to men's and women's DUPRs based on looking at that data. They could try to calibrate the relative level of men's DUPRs and women's DUPRs to account for the data that they actually have. But as far as I know, as far as I've seen them talk about publicly, they haven't done that, right? They can make an adjustment where they say, okay, a 4-0 woman is really more equivalent to, let's say, a 3-8 man. So let's leave the 4-0 woman the same, and let's move the 3-8 man up to a 4-0. And I think the reason to do that is the reason why they say DUPR exists in the first place, because they're trying to provide they call it a universal rating, right? That's part of the name. And the reason they want these universal ratings is, for example, you've got mixed gender sessions like the ones you talked about. Most of the sessions, there are some single gender DUPR sessions, but a lot of the DUPR sessions that you talked about are co-ed and mixed gender. And so, any man and any woman in the right DUPR range can enter those DUPR sessions. Now, if the men tend to be a little underrated relative to the women, then you're going to have the effect where if women go into these DUPR sessions that are primarily male, they might have their DUPRs go down, and they're not going to be that interested in playing those. And that's because the DUPRs aren't really equivalent, and you don't have as competitive a session as you could have if DUPR went out and tried to actually calibrate men's and women's DUPRs. That's what I think.
I think we could do a whole episode on this. I think what we're deciding, though, is that the DUPR is dynamic, but it's not universal yet. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. Especially across groups that don't have a lot of cross-pollination with each other. So, we don't have time to get into it. I think we're going to wrap up soon, but people talk about this in terms of age and geography as well. So, I know there is we don't have time to get into it, but there is a fair amount of games between people of different ages, and there's some games between people from different regions, but definitely I've heard people talk about how DUPRs are not equivalent across age groups or across geographies. And DUPR could do the same thing that I talked about in terms of trying to assess, hey, is there a problem? Are DUPRs in Chicago and Illinois equivalent to DUPRs in Florida or Arizona or California? And I haven't traveled enough. I don't know DUPRs across the country at all. So I don't know for a fact that they are different, but they have the data to look at this. And I think they should affirmatively try to make these kinds of calibrations and adjustments. They don't, right? So the example I gave, where you have a 4-0 men's team who's playing a 4-0 women's team. Let's say the men are a little underrated, so that they will beat the women's team. The two teams that are in that match, they'll have their DUPRs adjusted. The men's DUPRs will go up a little bit, the women's will go down a little bit, and that's fine. But DUPR doesn't take the information from that match and from all the other matches it could study and say, hey, maybe we don't need to just adjust the particular teams that are playing that match, but let's maybe adjust the overall level of men's and women's DUPRs to make them more comparable to each other. And again, I don't know for a fact that they are not comparable, but they have the data to look at this and also to make these kinds of adjustments if they find out that they're not comparable. If they're not comparable, they should make these adjustments, because otherwise it's not universal.
Do you think that we should send this episode to that lead data scientist at DUPR?
Hopefully she listens. I would love to talk to her. Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe they have looked at this. I haven't seen her talk about it. She's amazing. Like, we'll put some links into the show notes for a couple of interviews and podcasts that she's done. She's such an impressive person, and she's also a high level. She's got a great DUPR.
Listen,
I will say, Gina, I looked at her DUPR. I think it went down after she played in a mixed gender group.
Oh my gosh.
But she is incredibly impressive. People should listen to a couple of the podcasts that we'll put in the show notes. And maybe they have studied it and maybe there's nothing to it, but I haven't heard them talk about it publicly.
Yeah. Yeah. So it does beg the question of if it is truly universal at this point.
Yeah. They've definitely, here's the thing, they definitely said it's supposed to be universal. So that's their position. And if that's the case, and if people have suspicions that maybe it's not actually universal across, let's say, gender groups, then they should maybe come out and give us some information that it really is. Or if it's not, they should try to make some adjustments to make it truly universal. Because you do have these mixed gender groups that are run, DUPR sessions that are run at these clubs. And it doesn't make sense if the ratings are not universal.
Mm-hmm. Wow, Howard.
So I think, okay, I've lost all my pickleball friends, I guess, at the end of this. We're going to have a second DUPR episode coming after this. If you hate us, if you hate me, everyone loves Gina. Everyone loves Gina's voice. It's delightful,
Howard.
I'm told.
Don't be bitter,
If you hate me, email us or tell me if you see me. We would love to get feedback on this in particular, and we'll kind of cover that on the subsequent show. We're also going to give some DUPR advice. Like, if you care about your DUPR, maybe maybe some strategies, some ideas of how to manage that. I think the main advice, which we'll just give, is probably you should just play more DUPR matches and get a reliable rating. But we do have some ideas of things that you should think about.
Yeah, and then I'm new to the DUPR world, so I think I got a DUPR in August of this year. So I'll talk about some of my experiences, and I mentioned a tournament coming up as well. So yeah, I'll be sharing some insight that we gain and kind of look at how mine fluctuates with each match put in.
Okay, Gina, Coach's Corner. What do you have for us this episode?
Coach's Corner. Thanks, Howard. You know what? A concept that has been brought up in so many lessons lately is really keeping our swings compact, especially at the kitchen line. So I am very, very guilty of this. We'll find ourselves swinging with a big windup and a big follow through at the net, trying to hit this winner, thinking that point's over. It's hard to hit a winner in pickleball. So we need to just kind of shift our mindset, assume that ball is always coming back, keep that paddle out in front and ready. I do recommend watching video of yourself, because I know for me, like, I thought, oh, I'm not doing that. And then, I rolled the tape and I sure am. So something that I'm just keeping in the back of my mind and trying to stay aware of. So, keep your strokes, especially at the kitchen, nice and compact.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I know I've been trying to hit a little bit of a backhand flick at the net these days. I love to try to flick the shit out of it, Gina. I just want to hit that thing as hard as possible, and often it does just come right back to me, and I'm not remotely prepared because I'm still in my follow through at that point.
Oh yeah, we've all been burned there before.
But it's really enjoyable if I really hit it hard and it goes for a winner.
Oh, when it works,
that might be worth it.
It's next level.
It's not good strategy though. That's why you're here, Gina. So for people that want coaching from Gina on this and many other things, they should contact her at gtpicklecoach at gmail.com. It's gtpicklecoach@gmail.com. Comments to us, please send them to thirdshotrants@gmail.com. We're definitely doing a follow-up on DUPR. We got a second episode that's coming up. It might be the one that follows this one, or it might be one after that, but we want your feedback. We want you to tell me that I'm just being like a jackass, and I'll apologize or something. I'm deeply sorry. But we'd love to do that on the next DUPR episode.
Thanks, Howard.
Happy pickling, Gina.
Happy pickling,
that's our
Howard.
sign off. Okay, except we're going to do the after show now, for which we still don't have intro music, but we're going to do a really quick after show. This episode's going a little long as it is, but we're gonna do it anyway. Gina, what's our after show this episode?
Howard, today we're talking about our favorite lunch spots. Should I go first and share mine?
Yeah.
All right. So one of my favorites is Pita Inn. There's one in Skokie, right by Piccadilly. And I know that this is one of your favorites as well. And so,
how do you know that, Gina?
Because you go there 4 times a week for lunch. But Pita Inn is special to us now because all of this year I had been begging to meet your wife. I want to know the woman who, decided to marry you in the sweetest way possible.
Very fair.
And you continually said, I cannot meet your family, I cannot come to your home, and all that good stuff. But one rainy spring day, I walk into Pita Inn. I've got an hour break between lessons at Dilly, and I see you, and I freak the fuck out waiting for my food. And I say, where is she? Let me see her. So you gently escort me over to the table, and I get to meet your wonderful wife, and we have lunch together, and I'm obsessed with her.
She loves you too, Gina. She does.
I think my assessment of her was that she's way cooler than you, Howard. But I adore you both and your son. But it was really special meeting Katie at Pita Inn. So that one's gonna stay in my favorite. What about you, Howard?
Okay, my favorite lunch spot, or at least the spot I'm going to talk about today, is a small place called Rosita's Tacos and Cocina. It's on Lawrence Avenue in Chicago. It's right around Lawrence and Kimball. It's kind of on the north side of Lawrence, more or less directly across from the Kimball Brown line. It's a lovely operation. There's a guy there who does front of the house stuff. He's tremendously gracious and kind. One of the very first times that my wife and I went there was a woman who was kind of in distress. She was running from some guy who was, I think she knew him, and he was harassing her. She wasn't a customer. She just came to the restaurant to try to get someone safe, and the guy was completely kind and gracious in helping her. He locked the door. We called the police, or tried to call the police. It took a alarmingly long time to get the police to actually show up. But there was a guy harassing her and banging on the window outside, and the guy who's front of house there was just so nice to this woman who he didn't know. She was just someone off the street, and he was tremendously helpful in helping her out. So they're lovely people. I believe his mother does the cooking in the kitchen, and they're great people, but the food is also amazing. So I tend to have this habit, Gina, of I kind of figure out what is the thing I most like at a restaurant, and then I just eat that. That's what I do almost everywhere.
Yeah, you're an interesting specimen, Howard. But you know what? Why mess with a good thing? So what's your order right now?
So my order right now, so I like going to restaurants, and they know us now. So we go in, and the really nice guy, he'll just say the usual, and we nod, and it's good. We're done. My regular order is a 2 bistec tacos. So these are tacos with very thinly sliced steak that's kind of griddled, and it's served with sliced grilled jalapenos and onions, with the usual cilantro and onion topping. But the grilled jalapenos and onions really kind of make the whole dish. It's a little spicy, a little umami-y, just delicious, and they cook it with tremendous care. My wife's, she also has a usual order. She gets a veggie taco dinner. She tends to eat pretty vegetarian these days, and one issue with the tacos or burritos at a lot of taco places is they tend to be a little pedestrian. So sometimes it's just rice and beans, and some cheese, and maybe you get some tomatoes and lettuce thrown in, and it's not that interesting. At Rosita's, the veggie taco usually has broccoli, mushrooms, bell peppers, squash, onions, and they're cooked with, you can tell they're cooked with great care. Like everything comes out crisp and well prepared, well seasoned, and she loves it. It's a great dish for her.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
They're tremendous people. We'll put I think I have the address at 3336 West Lawrence, right around Lawrence and Kimball. Just lovely people, lovely food. They're very small operation. It's not super fancy, but it's really well prepared food. And if they ask you who sent you, tell them the crazy people, the guy who's often dressed like he just came from playing pickleball, and he always gets the bistec tacos, and his wife always gets the veggie tacos, and he'll know who we are.
Gosh, too funny.
They're fantastic. I couldn't recommend them more.
Yeah, I'm gonna check them out. Thanks, Howard.
Okay, that really is it, Gina. Bye, Gina.
Bye.